Well, it is our pleasure to introduce Dr. Tom Budzynski, and his specific area, I'll let Dr. Steve address this in a little bit more detail. He's been looking at, over the past few years at the effects of our energy patches and our ice wave patches, and we've wanted to know what effect this was going to have on the bioelectrical properties of the body, on the nervous system. It's very important for us not only to establish that the products work and they do what we say, but we also want to know that the products are safe. And that's one of the aspects of the testing that comes back. So on this specific project with Eon, we were looking to find out, well, is this product safe? What type of effect is it going to have on the nervous system? And the results that he is going to report to you in our minds were extraordinary, and were really early on the first indication that this was indeed having the profound anti-aging effect that we believed it was, and it certainly laid the groundwork for other research studies that followed.
Yes, and Dr. Budzynski does not need an introduction for anybody that's in the neuroscience field. He is world-renowned. I can't think of a better speaker to follow Dr. Clark today because of his tie-in to the nervous system. But Dr. Budzynski has been researching in biofeedback field for many years, and either he's written the book on biofeedback or his articles are quoted in the book on biofeedback. So if you've got a book on biofeedback, you'll find that they talk about his research. So he's been doing this for many years. He's 97 years old, and looks wonderful for his age, and I never pick on him, so I'm just trying to be honest with you here. So thank you, Tom.
Please welcome Dr. Tom Budzynski.
No, and I never did see any aliens at Area 51. If I had, I think I'd had a much better career ahead of me, just making speeches about aliens at Area 51. My wife, Helen, who writes most of the grant material that we have and has 30 years of experience as a professor at the University of Washington, wrote an introduction that she would like me to read, putting our study in kind of a perspective, and so I shall. Among the newer approaches to anti-aging medicine is that which is now being called regenerative medicine. Within this regenerative approach is research such as stem cell rejuvenation of organs. It is foreseen that stem cell rejuvenation of retinal tissue, for example, can bring about recession of macular degeneration, or that stem cells can regenerate heart muscle, which has been damaged by embolism and oxygen deprivation to the heart. Such regeneration of the heart could replace transplantation. This last example of stem cell rejuvenation is actually now entering the market, announced by Biotime on Tuesday, January 4th, 2011. I quote from their announcement. In the case of EPCs, which are endothelial precursor cells, in cardiovascular and blood therapies, all the Biotime proposes to do is to give you cells identical to the cells already in your body, but improved through telomere lengthening. You have cells of various telomere lengths in your body now, so this poses no risk. So says Biotime. They continued, as I've often said, the remarkable thing about regenerative medicine is that it is not the invention of new drugs with unknown side effects. It is simply the replacement of the body's own unique cells and functions in rejuvenated form. Regenerative medicine is not inventing new therapies, it is discovering the way your body works at peak youthful efficiency and discovering the way to restore those processes. Within regenerative medicine is another advancing movement that of the biochemical knowledge of the body, the recognition of numerous peptides which are naturally occurring, controlling the healthy functions of the body. As more and more of these peptides are specified and categorized based on their biochemical activity, it will greatly enhance anti-aging programs. A sterling example of peptides which have been isolated and demonstrated for use in cancer treatment are those discovered by Dr. Stanislaw Budzynski. Just like my name, one letter different. Understand he has all Polish guys working for him. Good man. We read in Suzanne Summers' book, Knockout, of Dr. Budzynski's development of anti-neoplastins, emerging from peptides which interfere with the growth of numerous types of cancer cells. These specific peptides have been modified in their gene expression such that they can inhibit the uptake of growth-critical amino acids in cancer cells. This is the monumental step in the use of peptides in anti-aging medicine. Of course, we are all familiar with the use of two anti-aging peptide facilitators developed into patches by David Schmidt, carnosine and glutathione. Carnosine is a dipeptide already known for its antioxidant properties. Studies by 3 Russians, Babizhayev et al., 2010, show the protective mechanism of buffering oxidative stress through the use of carnosine drops in the eyes, thus preserving the telomere length in epithelial cells. These epithelial cells have shortened telomere lengths in the cataracts of aging eyes. Other protective properties are abundant, such as interfering with the damaging glycosylation process during metabolism, and most of these properties are known to you folks in the audience. Glutathione is a tripeptide which you all know to be the most effective natural immune booster in the body. Besides its action as antioxidant and cellular detoxifier, it is known to aid in the synthesis of DNA and increasing of neurotransmitters. The importance of its action is expressed in cell development and maintaining functionality and viability of cells central to maintaining the healthy body and aging. Because of the importance of glutathione in the brain, its increased expression there is clinically indicated for neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. When LifeWave-influenced peptides are seen in the light of regenerative medicine, where the focus of anti-aging is restoring vital natural substances, we realize we might be at the forefront of this movement. At this point, I will give you some results of our study of the actions of the X15 patch on aspects of the autonomic nervous system. Okay. All right. So this works, right? Good. The study, at the time of the study, we didn't know what the purpose of the X15 was. We did this over a year ago. We decided to look at the power spectrum, and they wouldn't tell us. We decided to look at the power spectral density of the HRV. That's heart rate variability, since that would help specify the possible change in autonomic response to the X15. A biocom system was used to gather the heart rate variability data. Biocom is a very good system that's used in about 10 different universities for heart rate variability study. Why is heart rate variability important? Grossman stated that the heart rate, its variability, and time and frequency domain parameters often serve as a window to the general health of the body. The general health of the body. Aging and sympathetic tone. And Dean has already talked about this. Aging is characterized by increased sympathetic tone. A fellow with an interesting name, Nig Av et al., 1993, did a nice study on that. As an example, Denino, another one, 2001, found age-related reductions in limb blood flow were mediated by chronically elevated sympathetic tone. You know how many people have limbs that don't seem to have enough blood when they're under exercise? That's mediated by elevated sympathetic tone. Thiessen et al. Showed that reducing the chronically elevated sympathetic tone of older men restored flow-mediated vasodilation, reducing the chronically elevated sympathetic tone, and you get a decrease in an aging response. Instrumentation that we use. The Biocom heart rate variability system allows precise spectral frequency analysis as well as the generation of an autonomic balance parameter, and that's important, based on a database collected at 2 universities. HRV systems are also used to measure and feedback HRV information so as to improve cardio functioning. The Biocom system provides a fairly accurate measure of sympathetic and parasympathetic activity as it impacts heart rate variability. In other words, the HRV system is a good way of looking at your autonomic nervous system and seeing what it's doing. These are some of the variables that you get. The HEG is fast Fouriered to obtain these frequency parameters. VLF, very low frequency, primarily a sympathetically mediated parameter. And incidentally, in the first study that we did for LifeWave, which was of the energy patches, the VLF decreased significantly over placebo patches, and that meant that there was a decrease in sympathetic activity as well, even with the energy patches. LF norm, a low-frequency parameter which is primarily sympathetically mediated as well. HF norm, a high-frequency parameter which is mediated by the parasympathetic activity. LFHF, an important ratio that measures autonomic balance with regard to heart innervation. All cell phones off, whatever. The autonomic balance score. In addition to generating the usual frequency domain spectral parameters, the Biocom system also calculates an autonomic balance score based on a database of normals. This score is based on the ratio of levels of sympathetic to parasympathetic activity. And a lot of universities are using that now in studies. The autonomic tonus and balance. You may not have heard that term before. Autonomic tonus is the net level of sympathetic and parasympathetic activity. It's kind of how much drive does the heart get from both systems. It is graphed as a vertical level on the autonomic balance diagram in the next slide. You'll see it. A normal tonus level would be a 10. The autonomic balance on the horizontal axis, the autonomic balance, as opposed to the autonomic tonus, runs from -10 to +10 with a norm value of 0. Thus, a person with a perfect autonomic balance would show as a point in the center of the diagram, as MS did after the patch was applied. Now here you see the diagram, and it does take a little bit of explaining. The perfect autonomic response would be right in the center of that center square. That means he would have balanced sympathetic and parasympathetic to the heart, and he would have the correct amount of drive to the heart as well. MS was a fellow that had been a Navy diver, and lots of Navy divers, ex-Navy divers now, are having problems with psoriatic arthritis. We didn't know he had it at that point. He was diagnosed several months later with it. But he scored very high, as you see the top black dot right there in the blue diagram. And after we put the patch on, and it was only 10 minutes later, we measured him again, and he had centered the dot just about. He felt really good. And we gave him some of the X15 patches, that's what we called them then, to take home. And he felt quite good with them. So we can't wait now to try more X15s, because he's now taking Humira, which is a rather deadly kind of chemo, which does stop the psoriatic arthritis, but has all kinds of ugly side effects. And so I hope the X15 can help him to get off of that Humira. We then ran 20 people, and we did a kind of a median average look at it. Now, you got to remember, these are normals, except for the one fellow, and he wasn't included in this group, by the way. And the normals in pre were sort of inside the circle there, kind of toward the upper right, but their post indicated that they came more toward the center. So even these supposedly normal individuals benefited somewhat with more balance according to a very short application of the X15. And results for the study. We got more data here. We hypothesized the patch would move the LF-HF ratio toward balance. The mean ratio did change significantly, P less than 0.05, you always hear P's from researchers, from 6.2 to 4.0. Additionally, the mean autonomic balance score was also significantly decreased towards 0. Again, P less than 0.05. There's the two graphs of that. And you can see both mean and median. And it decreased in the direction that it was supposed to for all 20 people. Autonomic balance also proceeded the way it should have toward a balance point. I won't bore you with the details of that. Conclusion. The important finding was that the X15 patch appeared to change the autonomic innervation to the heart and probably the rest of the body toward balance. In other words, the parasympathetic increased in its innervation, and to a lesser extent, the sympathetic decreased its intervention. Wenger's research with the 2,000 aviation cadets. Now, Wenger was my favorite professor at UCLA in 1964, a grand old man who became famous when he went to India with a grad student and a 3-wire polygraph for the first time and showed that the Indian holy men weren't godlike. They couldn't stop their hearts, as a 2-wire polygraph had shown for years. With his 3-wire system, he showed they went into atrial fibrillation, which indeed was still kind of miraculous in a way, but they held him in a prison for 2 weeks with his grad student because they tried to figure out what is the government going to say to the people in all the religious groups. And they find out their holy men aren't holy, exactly. And Wenger had to convince them that this was a pretty miraculous thing that they were doing, in spite of it. Who else could do that? And so they finally let him go. Anyway, what he did during the World War II was he took 2,000 healthy aviation cadets and he examined them with all kinds of physiological data. And I was part of one of his experiments at UCLA, and that was kind of fun, but no time for that. Anyway, and then he developed what he called an A-bar, bell-shaped distribution. And at one end of this distribution were the people that were sympathetically dominated at that point, and at the other end of the distribution were these healthy guys that were parasympathetically dominated. Now, 15 to 20 years later, I'm getting ahead of myself here, he followed up with a questionnaire 15 to 20 years later. That's about the time I came into the school system there at UCLA. He found almost all those who had suffered illness of some kind in that 15 to 20 years belonged to the dominant sympathetic nervous system group. Almost everyone had been in that group as a healthy young man. Only asthma and ulcers seemed to fall into this dominant parasympathetic group. Could the balancing effect of the LifeWave patches offset these unfortunate results in the long run? Overall conclusions. The X15 patch, or AON, appeared to adjust autonomic innervation to the heart, moving it toward a balance of sympathetic and parasympathetic. Now, research has shown as individuals age, their autonomic balance tends toward a sympathetic dominance. Wenger's long-term follow-up of his Air Force people showed that 15 to 20 years after the initial A-bar measures, those who had shown an SNS dominance had fallen prey to more illness than those who had been in the parasympathetic end. Perhaps the use of the X15 patch could act as part of an anti-aging protocol. And that's all, folks. Thank you.
Okay, another round of applause for Dr. Tom Budzynski.
It might have been a bit scientific for many people, but it does pretty much nail down that there is a true effect.